Hello. The American Vice President Mike Pence has arrived in Japan, where North Korea is likely to dominate his talks with the Prime Minister, Shinzo Abe. In a rare interview, a senior North Korean official has told the BBC his country is prepared to launch a nuclear strike, all-out war, if the United States decides to attack it. He also said missile tests would continue despite international condemnation. The North Korean Vice Foreign Minister was speaking to our correspondent John Sudworth in the North Korean capital.
If
the United States is reckless enough to use military means, it would mean from that very day an all-out war. Our nuclear weapons protect us from that threat. We will be conducting more missile tests on a weekly, monthly, and yearly basis.
If you could send one message to Donald Trump today, what would it be?
I would tell him that if the United States encroaches on our sovereignty, then it will provoke an immediate counter-reaction. If the USA is planning a military attack against us, we will react with a nuclear preemptive strike by our own style and method.
President Trump was asked about North Korea at Easter celebrations on Monday. Here's what he said. So, gotta behave was Mr. Trump's message for North Korea. Well, the country with the most to fear from the rising tensions is, of course, South Korea. Our correspondent Stephen Evans is in the capital, Seoul.
Just have a look around Seoul. This is a completely normal city. This doesn't feel like a city that fears war. Food markets everywhere, people going about their business. And that's because for pretty well 60 years now, they've lived with threats from the north, blood-curdling threats, and they never come to out-and-out war. And that's the way it feels now. The American Vice President has been here and he's used all those words, shoulder to shoulder, ironclad alliance, 100% support for you. But what he hasn't made clear is how he is going to persuade or force Kim Jong-un to desist from his nuclear path. He said that if North Korea attacked this place, and it's only 50 miles from North Korea, then there would be an overwhelming response. But they've always assumed that here. It would have been what Obama would have done. That central question of how you make Kim Jong-un change his policy remains unanswered.
A short while ago, the U.S. Vice President Mike Pence arrived in Japan after visiting South Korea. Japan is another U.S. ally in the region, which is unnerved by the rising tensions between America and North Korea. I spoke with our correspondent Rupert Wingfield-Hayes in Tokyo and asked him how Japan is feeling about the United States' hardening position on North Korea.
Prime Minister Abe has been quite supportive of President Trump's new harder line towards North Korea. And I think that reflects the frustration that has been felt by the Abe administration here in Japan about the previous Obama administration's policy of what was called strategic patience, what a lot of people here think is fancy words for doing nothing. And now President Trump has come along and said, well, we can't do that anymore, and we're going to, be hard line, and we're going to have everything on the table, including the possibility of military action against North Korea. Well, that's something that, strangely as it may seem, the Japanese government seems to be welcoming. And I think the reason for that is because they feel like this sort of pressure is needed to change the dynamic, and particularly to change the dynamic with China and to put more pressure on Beijing to tighten its sanctions against North Korea, which everybody here thinks is the real key to getting at the North Korean regime and getting it to try and back down on its nuclear weapons program.
So what are the Japanese hoping to hear from Mike Pence on this trip?
Well, he came. I mean, actually, what's interesting is this was a pre-arranged trip. He was supposed to be here to talk about trade and the fact that the Trump administration has cancelled the Trans-Pacific Partnership and to start again on the trade negotiations to try and have a bilateral trade agreement. Clearly, that is now being overshadowed by North Korea. And I think what the Japanese will want to know more clearly from Vice President Pence is exactly what does this new policy mean and what are the American government's tactics? What are they thinking of? How actually is this going to work in terms of putting more pressure on North Korea, putting more pressure on China? They'll want to know what the Chinese are saying to the Americans in response. Of course, President Xi Jinping was in the United States recently, so they'll want to hear about how that went as well. They'll basically want to debrief and, of course, to express their own feelings about this new policy.